Free speech is a principle. When we say that Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever platform is silencing free speech, we are not talking about the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects multiple rights, of which one of those is free speech. So this constant conflation of a private company isn't violating your First Amendment. I'm not going to bring up the First Amendment. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to go on a platform, I'm going to express my ideas and share news, and if they silence me, they are violating my free speech. Now, more importantly, this argument about, you mentioned there's a fever dream on the left and the right. I want to make one thing clear. Mark Zuckerberg coming out and saying that now we're going to have more free speech or whatever it is he's trying to say, this is not a pendulum swing. This is not the weather vane. Certainly, I do believe the man is just bending the knee to whatever power structure he sees. But if we were actually going to see a pendulum swing in the other direction, they would keep the fact-checking program, ban the liberal news outlets, and only allow conservative outlets to fact-check posts on Facebook. When you look at all sides, when you look at ground news, the majority of U.S. fact-checkers had a liberal bias, and only one, which was associated with the Daily Caller, was considered to be conservative-leaning.
Elon Musk just sparked a massive storm online. He's defending a man Piers Morgan calls one of the most controversial figures in the UK. Musk says, "Free Tommy Robinson," and Piers fires back hard with his criminal past. What happens next gets intense.
Can you assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No.
And can you tell us a little bit about what your plan is? Are you going to negotiate a new treaty? Are you going to ask the Canadians to hold a vote? What is the strategy?
Yeah, I can't assure you. You're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two.
Cara, I've been trying to work out just how big your head may have been exploding.
Feels a little loaded, Piers. It feels a little loaded. I guess it's just me. But go ahead.
No. You can more than hold your. I could have 10 men up against you, Cara, and I'd back you every time.
True.
But I've been thinking about you because your head must have been exploding, hasn't it, the last week with all that's been going on with some of your favourite people?
No, my head doesn't explode, Piers. No, this is what they're like. I don't know if you've read my book or not, but this is what they're like.
I did,
This is exactly the way Mark always was. And he's like, I called him, he's kind of a sad weather vane. He just sort of tips and goes along depending on what's in his self-interest. And this is what he is like. He's always found it irritating that he has to have responsibility for anything or consequences anywhere in the world, and doesn't consider himself a publisher. And so he'll do whatever it takes at whatever time it takes. So I find him disloyal to almost everyone, including back when he threw Trump off the platform. I just don't trust him with anything. And in 4 years' time, he'll switch again if it's in his best interests, financial interests, really.
I mean, he wouldn't be the first media titan to go where the power and money wind blows. But on the detail of his statement yesterday, which was a pretty extraordinary reversal.
Well, it was also full of. It was a little mendacious on a number of things. By the way, there are a lot of conservative fact checkers in that fact-checking situation. And many years ago, he talked about how AI was going to solve this, and now it's community notes that's going to solve this. It's a multifaceted problem, and the real issue is the site is built for malevolent players, and sometimes government, sometimes people, to do whatever it want on the system. It's a system that's impossible to fact check. It's a system that has no guardrails on it, and it's a system in which he uses the First Amendment when it suits him. I actually don't think he's read it, even though it's short and first. Governments shall make no law. Like, it doesn't say Facebook shall make no law. He makes rules and then he breaks them. And then he says, with Alex Jones, he did that with all kinds of things. And then he reverses himself. Holocaust deniers was a good example. He told me in an interview, and we got, I was like, well, he said, Holocaust deniers don't mean to lie. And I said, well, that's kind of the definition of a Holocaust denier. But and then 2 years later, reversed it. And then who knows if he's going to, now he seems to have reversed it again. And so I don't think he has any particular principles or values that are lasting. He can do whatever he wants because he's king of that site.
Well, yeah, to a point, I guess he can. Dave Smith, what did you make of this?
He's king of that site. Piers, he can't be fired ever. His children can't be fired. Let me just be clear. He has total control of that site.
But you're talking to the wrong accent when it comes to kings. We like our kings. We like kings.
I know, you have a better king. I'd rather have Prince Charles running that thing.
We believe in maniacal power. So,
yes.
Dave Smith, I mean, I found it jaw-dropping, to be honest, notwithstanding a lot of what Cara just said. that she wasn't remotely surprised by the wind blowing. But to actually see him, trot down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the Trump ring, as it was put, and to then do really what turned out to be half mea culpa and half screeching U-turn over pretty much everything that Facebook had stood for, was pretty spectacular to watch.
Yeah, it was incredible. And, I want to be clear. I think this is a really positive thing. I don't believe in so like I kind of want to be happy about it, but all of my instincts are just to rip the guy, because especially because he doesn't acknowledge there's no acknowledgement that he did something wrong or that he's changed his mind on this. It's kind of this just vague, like, oh, I created this to give people a voice. And a lot of people think this stuff went too far. And like, yes, it reminds me of, I debated Chris Cuomo last year, and it reminds me of him coming out and saying, like, hey, you guys, this ivermectin stuff isn't horse dewormer, it turns out. It's people medicine. And you're like, yeah, that's what we were all saying at the time, in my world at least, and we got a lot of abuse for that. At one point, I do think it's worth just pointing out what happened over these years, even though I think this is a very positive change. I was just playing on my show the other day a video clip. I'm sure all of you guys have seen it. But Mark Zuckerberg blatantly admitted that both Facebook and the FBI interfered in the 2020 election on the Joe Rogan Experience. And, for all of the news coverage, and to some degree rightfully so, over the last 4 years about January 6th, about some of Trump's claims of the election that him and his lawyers were really never able to demonstrate at all. But how about that admission that the FBI came and told Facebook, be prepared for a Russian dump that's coming soon?
Right from the start, Kara Swisher tears into Mark Zuckerberg, calling him a man who shifts with the wind, someone with no real core values. Then Dave Smith drops the big one, reminding everyone of that Joe Rogan interview where Zuckerberg talked about the FBI's warning that led Facebook to limit the Hunter Biden laptop story. Piers Morgan, who lived through that New York Post drama, looks completely fed up. Dave argues that this kind of coordination between platforms and officials might have influenced public perception, and the debate gets tense fast. The entire panel is fired up, and it's honestly one of the most intense exchanges I've seen.
And then when the laptop came out, you have 50 plus intelligence officers signing on to this letter saying that this is the Russian disinformation. And he admitted to censoring people for that. This is like blatant election interference by the FBI and one of the biggest tech companies out there. I mean, I would think if you're going to reverse that, it would also come along with like an apology and some admission of what you were a part of. He says he created the site to give people a voice. You robbed your fellow Americans of their voice in a very important, crucial point in American history.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was a New York Post columnist at the time that all went down with their exclusive on Hunter Biden's laptop, which turned out to be a completely genuine story, and certainly wasn't Russian disinformation. And the way that all played out was quite extraordinary and pretty terrifying to see that the New York Post...
Well, although, guys, come on. Look, tech companies make mistakes the way publishing companies make mistakes.
But that wasn't a mistake, Cara, was it? I mean, it wasn't a...
Well, no,
they
let me just
hang on.
Hang
on, my point. They actually banned the New York Post X account completely. Completely.
Yes, they did.
If they didn't take down their true story. I mean, that is the most blatant attack on free speech I've ever seen.
It's not free speech. It's not a government institution. Companies do that. Disney didn't put out a movie in China because the Chinese
It doesn't make it right, though, does it?
Of course not, but it's not, you're equating Facebook. You're equating Facebook or Twitter with the government. It is not a public square.
No, I'm not.
To be very clear, I certainly was not. Listen,
Right.
I was not equating Facebook and the FBI, and I think it is reasonable to point out that a lot of these big tech companies were under duress really since Donald Trump won in 2016. All the heads were hauled in front of Congress and threatened up and down if they didn't get this misinformation problem under control. But is the claim here that those intelligence officers made a mistake and really thought this was Russian disinformation?
Here's what I'm saying,
and
is
then
our
realized
government,
it was Hunter Biden's laptop?
Our government should be talking. Go ahead.
Tim, no, let Cara finish her point, then I'll bring you in, Tim.
The government should constantly be talking to lots of companies because there are disinformation campaigns from Iran, Russia. You can't pretend that China's not all up in our grill. You just can't. You just can't. And there should be discussions between government and companies. They're going to occur. By the way, they've been occurring since the beginning of time, way back when, go watch Oppenheimer. There's discussions happening all the time on all levels between companies. The question is, what is pressure and what is important discussions that these companies, because they are at the nexus of all these information systems, should be having, and what are the guardrails against government overreaching? I am all for stopping government overreach. I did a great interview with Edward Snowden about this issue. Perhaps the way he did it wasn't right, but what the government was doing was wrong. They fixed it. There should be guardrails around these things. The question is how it's done. But what happens is there's a fever dream on the left and a fever dream on the right of what's occurring, and it's a little less nefarious. I think that Facebook, unfortunately, occupies a far too important role in news distribution as a kind of a monopoly. And that's the problem we have going forward. It's a private company that's determining what everybody sees. And they're going to not just make mistakes. We're at the behest of Mark Zuckerberg's obviously incompetent ability to decide what's right and wrong.
Okay.
Or should he, by the way?
Let me bring Tim in. You've been waiting patiently. Tim, your response.
Free speech is a principle. When we say that Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever platform is silencing free speech, we are not talking about the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects multiple rights, of which one of those is free speech. So this constant conflation of a private company isn't violating your First Amendment. I'm not going to bring up the First Amendment. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to go on a platform, I'm going to express my ideas and share news, and if they silence me, they are violating my free speech. Now, more importantly, this argument about, you mentioned there's a fever dream on the left and the right. I want to make one thing clear. Mark Zuckerberg coming out and saying that now we're going to have more free speech or whatever it is he's trying to say, this is not a pendulum swing. This is not the weather vane. Certainly, I do believe the man is just bending the knee to whatever power structure he sees. But if we were actually going to see a pendulum swing in the other direction, they would keep the fact-checking program, ban the liberal news outlets, and only allow conservative outlets to fact-check posts on Facebook. When you look at all sides, when you look at ground news, the majority of U.S. fact-checkers had a liberal bias, and only one, which was associated with the Daily Caller, was considered to be conservative-leaning.
And then things completely blow up. Tim Pool talks about staying neutral, but Dina Baydallah isn't having it. He's furious, calling out billionaires for buying power and shaping politics while the rest of us just watch. You can feel his frustration boiling over. Then Kara Swisher jumps in, saying Elon Musk is becoming a real problem for democracy and even predicts a dramatic fallout between Musk and Trump. Meanwhile, Piers tries to keep control, but the whole panel just erupts. It's raw, it's passionate, and everyone's got something to say. Let me know which side you're on, because this debate was something else.
And when numerous outlets on the right made attempts to get access through Pointer to the fact-checking system, they were denied that. So now, once again, what do we see? Real quick, to another point, back to the First Amendment issue, I just want to add, the government had backdoors into X and Facebook where we actually got to click the link and go to the login portal for the federal government to go into Facebook to flag posts. And there was an instance where if you said the name Eric Charamella on YouTube or Facebook, your post would be inexplicably deleted. And everybody knew that was happening. And this is Real Clear Politics that it broke the reporting on Eric Charamella. So what we're looking at since Elon took over Twitter and turned it into X, we have consistently seen a dominant liberal or Democrat Party bias on these platforms. And when the problem is, quote unquote, resolved, you get neutrality. There's been no circumstance where we have seen a right bias or a conservative bias or a pendulum swing in the other direction. So Mark Zuckerberg right now is declaring neutrality. He's not actually swearing fealty or kissing the pinky ring of Trump.
Well, fascinating.
Are you kidding me?
Dean,
wait a second.
over to you.
I mean, the idea that what Mark Zuckerberg is doing is part of the plutocracy. It is part of the oligarchy. They're going down there and giving $1 million each to Donald Trump, Tim Cook, Jeff Bezos. You have Elon Musk, who's been the biggest oligarch of all. They are bending the knee. They're doing whatever he wants. And I wish that on the left and the right, we could put aside politics and say we need a system where big money is taken out and the power is given back to the people, to us. And then we can fight fairly on the issues without oligarchs spending millions and millions of dollars to corrupt our elections. And on the right, you don't like George Soros? Okay, let's ban his money as well. I'm fine with that. But Mark Zuckerberg, what he's doing is bending the knee because he is fearful. As Donald Trump said yesterday, maybe he's afraid because I threatened to put him in jail for his entire life. That's the big to go protect our First Amendment. The guy who threatens Mark Zuckerberg with jail for the rest of his life. A guy who threatened ABC and CBS. A man who threatened Donald Trump's Saturday Night Live. He wanted the comedy show canceled. So he is not a bastion of free speech. He is a strongman leader, a potential dictator, and they fear him, but they're about making money. So Mark Zuckerberg now is changing these rules and putting Dana White on, Trump's big buddy, on the board at Meta to make Trump happy. Leave him alone so he can make more money. Same thing with Bezos. Same thing with Cook. The list goes on. We live in an oligarchy, a plutocracy, to be accurate. And I don't know why on the right you're not angry like I am about the wealthy controlling our collective destiny as a people. Let's get their money out, then we can fight over the issues. I'm all for that.
This is the funny thing about what left and right really means. I completely agree. Billionaires, millionaires dumping tons of money to manipulate is a bad thing. What I'm talking to specifically, when I'm saying kissing the pink ring, if you want to make the argument that they're donating money to his inauguration and things like that, let's have that conversation. But Donald Trump, if this is Mark Zuckerberg trying to placate or please Trump, and he's settling with, I will let people speak, that's Trump accepting neutrality. If Zuckerberg was actually going to try and play this game that we had seen over the past 8 years or longer with Facebook, he'd say, you know what, we're going to bring on 10 new fact checkers, the Daily Wire, Breitbart, National Review, and we're going to give them preference and we're going to remove PolitiFact and Poynter's authority. But that's not what he's doing. He's saying, you can finally post again, which it's funny because when he basically downranked politics, he nuked his own platform, and it made most podcasters abandon the platform as a place where you couldn't do business anymore. So, again, you want to talk about money? I agree.
All my friends have posted about Palestinian issues, about Gaza, the suffering in Gaza and the West Bank, where my family lives in the West Bank under occupation. Our stuff is banned. We get thrown off the platform of Meta, of Facebook, of Instagram. Let's not play games here. These are oligarchs who have a financial motivation for what they're doing. Tim, you know that. Dave knows that. Karen, we all know this. We're on board. What are we going to do about it? We live in a new Gilded Age with a robber baron. Are we going to rise up with a backlash and have reform? Or are we going to let them control our collective destiny and be their serfs? That's our question. My question.
Well, I think Dean touched on something that's very important. And Piers, you know, I've said this like so many times on your show that oftentimes people think of the divide as left and right, but the reality is usually that the divide is between the regime and the dissidents.
Yes.
And so the point that you're making, Dean, about if you are critical of the current policy, which is to support Israel in their war in Gaza, then yes, then you're on the other side of the regime on that issue. Mm-hmm. And same if you're against supporting the war in Ukraine. But look, so it became, look, the thing that was the worst year of censorship was 2020. Okay. And in 2020, I mean, this is when I had a private group for supporting listeners of my podcast on Facebook that got completely nuked because you literally, I remember the video that got nuked were two doctors. This was in April of 2020 who were talking about how the ventilators were killing people. And this wasn't like an accusation of a conspiracy. Nobody was saying that like doctors meant to be killing people. And of course, the doctors realized they were right and ended up changing course. But the point is that had nothing to do with left or right. It was like, we're doing lockdowns. This is the policy of the regime. And if you're out there opposing this policy, you're going to be silenced. And just to the one point that was made earlier about misinformation from Iran or China or any of these things, I'm a libertarian. I don't like governments much anywhere. And all of them are guilty of misinformation and lying. But the point is that we were talking about our government, who were the ones involved in the misinformation, claiming that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. That was the lie.
Yeah.
And so you've got the
ironically, that was the disinformation.
You're being willfully naive. This is a worldwide information war going on with these companies. And Tim knows this. Tim knows this. Like they are infected everywhere. Many years ago, you know, I wrote a column about 7 years ago about TikTok and the possible national security issues surrounding it.
Just wait till you see this part, it's where everything explodes. Piers Morgan lays out his full argument against Tommy Robinson, listing the legal issues and controversies without holding back for a second. But then Tim Pool pushes right back, saying people have lost trust after how badly the government handled certain scandals. It's a total collision of viewpoints, and the tension is real. Then Kara Swisher jumps in and absolutely unloads on Elon Musk, calling him dangerous for democracy and predicting that his alliance with Trump won't last long. Every voice on the panel is fired up, and it turns into pure, high-voltage drama. Let me know what you think about this wild debate in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns like this.